Yes.
So I've had 4 or 5 doctors retiring on me recently.
And then you have to reestablish, and the project begins all anew. You have to describe the problems again. There seems like there's a parallel here with software. You have the charts. Aren't the charts supposed to explain everything? Like the doctor passes the charts to the next doctor, and then they don't have any more questions for you?
Well, in medicine, they always ask all the questions over again.
Yes, they do.
Every time.
Almost every appointment.
Every appointment, right? Every appointment, they ask me for my address, my phone number. It's not changed for 25 years. And they ask, even if I was there the day before,
yeah. So why would, maybe you know the answer to this, because I don't think I do. Why would a group, an industry, adopt what appears to be such an inefficient practice?
Well, because people do change their address and their phone number, and then they lose track of them because they don't inform them. So, rather than take a chance, that's one way to do it. It's just like in a program, you have a variable that's set for some value, and then you set it to the value again.
Mm-hmm.
Be sure.
Just in case.
Yeah.
I think I remember you categorizing that as a type of error in your book.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of reminds me of the pilot's checklist, where even though they look at everything every time there's a pre-flight checklist where they have to formally go through because maybe the cost of error is really high.
Yep. And of course, that's often referred to by people, for example, who consult the software methods and they don't know the difference between a checklist and a laundry list.
I'm not sure I do.
Of course, you probably don't. Have you ever seen a laundry list?
A laundry list.
In a hotel, you stay in a hotel, and they have a list of stuff you can send to the laundry.
Oh, the stuff you can send to the laundry? Does that have like shirts, pants, underwear, and you put a check mark next to each one or something?
Yeah. And a laundry list is a list of possibilities. A checklist is a list of requirements.
Okay.
You pick up your laundry list in a hotel and it says ladies' panties. You may not, it doesn't mean you have to have ladies' panties.
In order to use this, right?
But it's a reminder. You go through it and say, these are things you might want to do. But a checklist is things that you must do. It must be right before you're trying to take off.
Do we see that in software, that people confuse the difference, even whether it's a requirements document or even in a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, in several ways. Like a requirements document, there may be some things that are nice to have that they list. If you can get this, that'd be great. But if not, that's okay. But they don't indicate that clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And every little thing has to be implemented. Same way with steps in a procedure for building software, for example, or for testing. Not every step applies to every case.
Right.
Right? But they're often presented in a way that you have to try to do every one, or a lot of times on forms that we put out, there's a lot of boxes to be checked, things to be answered, but they don't say. Some put a little asterisk, which you can hardly see.
Optional.
Or this one you don't have to. But it confuses people.
Yeah, it reminds me most at the earlier jobs I worked at, we were a waterfall shop, and that was fine. And that was, most of the requirements started with the words, the system shall. Mm-hmm. And we would get 60 pages or something of the system shall, and it was just over and over again. Sometimes they put it in a little matrix, but there was never a sense that the system might. I don't know how they felt that would be interpreted. It always seemed so written in stone.
Yeah, we have the word we shall sometimes. It's also should. System should. And when we teach people, when it says should, to substitute probably won't.
Maybe we need to invent a new programming paradigm called should-driven development, where everything is very nebulous. But that probably won't. So you could say the system should allow a user to log in, and you would encourage someone to say, think of that as the system probably won't allow someone to log in.
Are you recording now?
I am.
Okay, because you're hearing all that background barking.
I am.
Well, I could get up and close the door, but maybe they got outside now. Okay, we'll see how.
Okay.
This is an old house. It has very good thick doors, solid doors. You know, they're not. But if you don't close them,
that has a lot of parallels too. We might build the facility, and if we never close the doors, I don't know if we would call that waste, but it certainly is an underutilized feature, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, you should close the door before you do. But you probably see your door is open.
But you can see my door, that's right.
Yours is a kind of a glass panel. I don't know if it's very good soundproofing.
It's not very good, but my dogs are small and they're outside. So at least for now, I think that's okay.
Well, small dogs can have a more annoying bark.
Yes, they do. Not always, but yes, one of ours does.
So it's like software, small errors can have an annoying bark.
You know, and oftentimes when I'm using a piece of software and I come upon something that I perceive to be an error, the smaller it is, sometimes it's actually more irritating to me because I feel as though it should have, because of the size I perceive it to be, it should have been so easy to fix. Doesn't mean it is. Might be a lot of reasons why it wasn't, but.
Well, I don't know how many times in my half century or more in the business, I've heard somebody say, some programmer say to me, well, it's just a small error. It's only one bit or one character. That has nothing to do with anything, right? And
right.
It's the effect that it has. And I had an interview recently, and I think they were asking me about errors and small errors, and I mentioned that in my errors book, I give some examples of some billion-dollar errors that were all one character or even one bit.
Wow.
Right? And the person who transcribed this interview changed that to million. I think they couldn't believe billion, but it actually billion with a B. So there's no limit to how much a single bit can cost you in the computer business.
Yeah, I was going to say, now that's a little different than a book. If one word in this book is misspelled, if one letter is out of place, we could say we only have one error. And the book is very useful still. By the way, wonderful book. But the book, even if
keep waving it around, you want people to be able to see it.
There we go. This is a book. It just happens to be The Secrets of Consulting by Jerry. So it's a fantastic book. But I was just sort of realizing that if we strictly think to ourselves, well, if this only contained one error, I would think of it as a very high quality, almost flawless book. But what you're saying is, of course, in software, counting errors that way doesn't make as much sense.
No, it doesn't. But it's used by people all over the world to make arguments about whether they should deliver their software or how good a job they're doing.
Or if someone should get a raise or a promotion.
Well, they count errors. And of course, even the way they count them, like if they do the same error like say you have an off by one error in a loop, and every loop in your program has that error, which is quite likely
Sure.
because the programmer doesn't understand looping, but it's counted as one error.
Because it's sort of one type of error with,
Yeah, it makes the statistics look good if that's what, if you're evaluating people on the number of errors, which you shouldn't be doing, then strive to reduce that number as reported in any way possible.
Then I just have to ask, because you brought it up, how should we be evaluating people?
Well, if you can, and it's not so easy as counting. The counting isn't that easy anyways. There's several ways to count. But what's the significance of the error? What is it? What is it costing your company?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is it costing you personally? How many customers do you lose because of this error, and what would their value be worth to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you can do this, but it's not as easy as just counting some stuff. Right? You have to estimate things, but it seems to me, put it in simple words, how important is this error?
Sure. How costly, and because it's an error, we're sort of looking at the negative, right? We're not looking at how much value did it deliver, but how much did this error cost us?
Yeah. I have an example I can give you. Maybe I gave it before, where one guy made one error in a year, and it cost a few $1 million.
Is that the guy who didn't want other people to check his work?
Yeah.
We did talk about that. That poor fella.
Well, I mean, that's, but so how do you evaluate that? Oh, he only made one error in a year.
But it was a lifetime's worth of pay in that error.
Yeah. So you have to, if you're working in a factory and you make one error and you stick a wrench in a machine and you destroy $1 million machine, what do you say? Oh, he only made one mistake?
Right.
Or I just seen this guy in Hawaii. They had this scramble with a report of a nuclear missile coming.
Yes.
I pushed this button, and they know who did it. And heaven only knows how much that cost the society. And they finally fired him. They put him on leave last week, and I heard today that they fired him. I mean, is that punishment? Is it prevention? I mean, what they should be doing, of course, is taking a look, which I've done, at the system and how all these different buttons are all together, not really serious ones and just trial ones, and are all stuck there together. So it would be very easy to your finger be off arm. I'm sure that you have done that.
Oh.
Pointing with your finger at the wrong, or with your mouse or whatever at the wrong item in a list.
Oh, yes.
And it costs millions.
And I heard with this guy, maybe you heard this too. The first story that came out, because I think this kind of error is pretty interesting as well. The first time I heard it I heard that he had pressed the wrong button. Mm-hmm. That what I heard yesterday was that he had intended to press that button because he was under the impression it was a real situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, like that shifts the problem. Like I'm sure the keyboard or whatever still needs some redesign. But in this case, he said, I heard them say, scramble, this is real. But then he had missed the precursor to that, which said this is a test.
Well, okay. So that's interesting. Because I'm looking at that case. I also heard that. So in the first case, you say, well, you need to redesign the buttons. And or you have to maybe get two people on two different monitors or whatever had to press same button simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so that's basically a system design principle. But in the other case, where the person misheard the thing, then it would help to have a two-button thing, or two different people. Because if one misheard, maybe the other wouldn't mishear. But it's likely that if they're both listening to the same broadcast or device, they might both mishear it easily for one reason or another. So that the two-button approach might not protect you. Okay? And you have maybe this means the guy is not very attentive. Maybe it means that the thing that broadcasts that he got, maybe there's something wrong with that system. You have to check back and look at that. So firing the guy may not do anything. It may actually make it worse, because at least he had experience. He maybe made a mistake. But so you have to trace back errors to where did they originate, not where did they appear.
Mm-hmm.
And in programs, that can be very difficult. Where did they originate, and how come your testing procedures didn't catch this? Right? And if they caught it, how come it wasn't fixed? Which all those things happen. Right?
Yeah. And going, like you and I have talked about you said, the idea that does firing him fix the problem? Mm-hmm. It fixed, as you taught me in the wonderful book about your lights on, it fixed somebody's problem who felt they needed to prove that they had gotten rid of this individual who made the error, possibly. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it'll be any different next time.
Right. Maybe worse.
Maybe worse. Maybe this person was actually, this is the one error he'd ever made in his whole lifetime. I have no idea.
Yeah. They probably don't either.
Right.
So it's all a matter of which we have in our business law is what do you do when something turns up like that? What action do you take? And the usual thing is what you described. Let's just find a guilty party and punish them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't fix the situation. It could, put the fear of God into them, and they'll be much more careful the next time. As a certain model of human behavior. But who knows? And you can't tell what the behavior is. On the two-button thing, see, if you go to a missile silo, and they're all over the United States, we have nuclear missiles ready to go.
Yeah.
And in order to launch one, it's the same kind of thing. They get a message that says, okay, we're being attacked. Launch your missile to destroy Moscow or whatever. They have two buttons that have to be pressed simultaneously. And they're not within reach. So that one person can't press both buttons.
Right.
So the kind of thing that happened in Hawaii. In this case, it's launching a missile. Right? And they, a while back, they found the guy who was manning one of these stations, building a device so he could push both buttons at the same time.
Why?
Well, he thought it would be convenient,
It's amazing.
He wouldn't need somebody else to confirm.
I think I remember in the movies seeing two people having to turn keys, but same thing. So they found somebody who was an innovative thinker, maybe, who thought, you know what, this is a dumb design. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I'll take a pole with some, I'll build something so that somebody can press. That was kind of the situation.
Yep. And, it shows a limit to what you can do as far as protecting. As somebody mentioned recently, they were quoting somebody, I forget who they were quoting, and I said that stupidity always wins out over intelligence because there's a much more variety to stupidity. Right? There are many, many, many more ways to be stupid.
Right.
Right?
I've told my kids that. I said, there's a lot of different ways to be wrong in life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my dad and I used to work on cars, and it seemed like every time we got a new car, it would break down. And this was in the 70s, I guess, 70s and 80s. And he was a shade tree mechanic, and we would be working on it. And he would sort of be grumbling that the idiot car designer didn't leave enough room to get a wrench, you know, in one place or another. And, you know, why did they do that? It would have been so much easier, this or that. And we finally get the part out. And then we look at it, and he would almost inevitably go, oh, that's why they did that. Oh, that makes more sense now. But when you're in the middle of the task, it seems like maybe the designer must have been bad at their job or didn't care about you, is actually the way he put it.
Well, one of the things I'm writing about design, one of the things that certain designs are transparent and certain ones are not. So, for example, well, the 2-button thing, apparently, I mean, you go transparent means a certain amount of intelligence required. So this guy apparently didn't realize, or I don't know for sure, because he may have wanted to start a war, you know, all by himself, right?
Well, I was going to say, I don't think you get that post unless they train you and probably teach you the purpose of the 2 buttons. But
well, ideally, but how many times have you taught something that they didn't get?
Or maybe they were distracted or whatever. Sure.
Or went to the toilet while that part of the lecture was going on.
Yep.
Just because you put something in a course doesn't mean people learn it.
Right? That's right.
But let's take an example, and I don't think I have one handy here. But no, I could get one. You get a wrench. You talked about working on cars with your name. You get a wrench, and the wrench has a number of design features that you don't realize are there. Here.
Is this a pipe wrench? Is this an open end box end? Is this a crescent?
Open end box wrench.
Okay.
And the length of the handle is why have different size handles on different wrenches? Right?
Yeah, they do come in a variety of sizes, right?
But it's the box that is important, right? The size of the nut that you're working on.
Yeah.
It has to fit, but why are the handles shorter? Well, see, you don't know, but it protects you. If you had a long handle on a small wrench,
you get too much
torsion, and you break the bolt, right? So
yeah.
It keeps you from making a certain mistake.
But now, a stupid person
will take a piece of pipe, stick it over the handle.
I have that piece of pipe.
A lot of leverage to do it. Right? So, see, there's never any protection against utter stupidity.
That's right. I have one of those pipes. I call it a breaker bar.
Yeah. And another thing, the angle of the handle is to the box is put there so that you can reach into certain places that if it was straight out, you wouldn't be able to do.
Right, because it's not like this. It's like this angle here, right?
Right. So that's put in there, and that gives you a facility that you just take for granted. You don't think about it.
It's not on the open end though, is it? At least I don't think I've remembered it. The angle's almost always on the box end.
Yeah. Well, there are different things in tool design that do this, but and of course, a lot of things are transparent. Like if you have a circular saw and it has a guard on it.
Yeah.
And some people take the guard off.
Yeah, I have a 3-fingered uncle that, yeah.
I can show you a scar on my leg.
Oh, I don't want to see it, but I've heard stories.
Well, it had one advantage. It enabled me to see the bone in my leg. How many people have seen that?
That's true. Now, is this principle of transparency, when you talk about this, does that mean that I as the user am able to see the purpose of the design, or that, like, what is transparent about the design? Because I'm assuming it's transparent to a person who's using it. Is that right?
Well, it's one transparency. It might be, I mean, if you're talking about software, it might be transparency to someone who has to update the code.
Uh-huh.
Right? So, and it's interesting because in software, and I've just been writing about this and thinking more about it. By and large, when you take an application software, it's intended not to be transparent to the user, in the sense that you're not supposed to know how it works inside. You shouldn't have to know that. It just does something which you see on the outside, and you should be able to rely on that. If you have to understand how it works on the inside, I mean, it's just as an ordinary user, that makes it difficult to use. Probably, if you are testing it, that's different. Right? If you're testing it, something as funny is happening, it helps to have an image of what's going on inside. That it might be doing this, right? But that's, so on one hand, you want it to conceal, and on the other hand, you want it to be revealed. It's one of the reasons that testing can be sometimes quite difficult.
Do you think that goal of concealing? So, okay, I don't quite understand. So maybe this goes back to, I don't know why I have so many stories about my father today. When I got my first computer, it was a Commodore VIC-20, and we hooked it up to the family room TV, and my father sat with it on his lap with these big cords coming away from our Curtis Mathis television set, which was black and white, or maybe it was color. And I tried to show him a few commands, and he said, okay, it's time for you to go to bed. You're 12. I know I'm pretty smart. And in the morning, the machine had been completely disconnected, put back in the box, and he had written the note, "Stupid computer," on the top, and he put it next to my door, and he never touched it again. I don't know what happened that night. But something occurred, and he told me later, he says, I couldn't figure it out. I tried to give it what it wanted, right? And he found it to be very untransparent. I think he was hoping for transparency to where he could reason about it, but he didn't sort of have any way to do that. Yeah. So, and I ask that because these days we do have, whether it's our phones or our internets or whatever, is it true that things that are like more concealed, are they easier to use?
Yeah,
I mean,
unless something goes wrong.
And well, as we talked about last time, I think something always goes wrong though, right?
Well, you keep going until you get something that goes wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And you remember being stopped. You don't remember all the ease that you had. You don't remember the hundreds of phone calls that you made that went right through. And,
right.
You know, and so you do remember the one where it kept dropping out.
Yep.
Or whatever. Right? So it's a problem. I mean, there are devices you use, I'm trying to think of, where you have a certain amount of understanding of what to do if something goes wrong.
Sure, my car has a variety of lights and words and things that blink, and it's limited.
Just yesterday, I'm looking over my other screen there, I see it. And there's a web page that I've got, and it says, when formatting or partitioning a drive, an error occurs stating the drive cannot be dismounted or unmounted. I got that message. I was trying to repartition the drive. Uh-huh. Somehow I think I've just wiped out the drive totally, so it can't be used at all. And I keep getting this message that says it can't be dismounted or unmounted. I'm not trying to dismount or unmount it. I'm trying to partition it. And I get this message. It's a long list of things to do that happens, which I tried to follow that whole list and didn't make any difference. And then I tried to get in touch with their support thing. No way to navigate through that. I mean, frequently asked questions is what the support is.
Right.
They frequently ask this question, apparently, but they didn't give an answer to.
Yeah, it's not frequently answered questions, is
Yeah,
it?
that's what we'd like to know about. So I got this useless drive, and I have two different backups in my system, but this one wasn't backing up. So I'm only down to one, which I don't feel good about. And I'm trying to think what to do next. I would like to call the support for a Western Digital who made this drive, but I can't figure out how to reach them. They seem to not want you to bother them. You know, I really.
They can reduce costs of repair that way.
Mm-hmm.
So your new book is System Design Heuristics. When you've been talking about, you've been writing about this, is that the book people can find out more?
Yeah.
Okay. So generally, is this design attribute of transparency something where we want things to be as transparent as possible? We want to just consider transparency as a design principle and ask ourselves, when is it right to apply it?
Who should it be transparent to?
Who should it be transparent to? Again, maybe the technician, the programmer, possibly, maybe the user.
I mean, like, I have a pair of sunglasses. Right? You may have sunglasses.
I don't.
They're nice for upright glasses. I need them because I sneeze from the sunlight. So I've got these they're very nice glasses. However, and they filter out some stuff, you know, so they're not completely transparent. It's all wavelengths of light and so on. And when I go out to put gas in my car, and they have a little display there that says what you do next and so on. If I look at that display with my sunglasses on, nothing shows at all.
It filters out the light from the LED display or whatever?
Combination of the LED filter or the only wavelengths it uses are filtered out by my sunglasses. So I'm pumping gas. I have to take off the sunglasses. I start sneezing. I'm trying to pump gas. In every other situation, those sunglasses work very well so far. But
well, you wouldn't have that problem in Oregon.
No, because they wouldn't allow me to pump my own.
That's exactly right. We're not competent.
The wisdom of the legislature made that laws just for me, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. If you ever, because you've been here a lot, so you benefited from it, and I'm sure, and paid the extra price for it.
Well, and my previous sunglasses may not have done that. I don't know. But these sunglasses I've worn for several years and never caused me any problem until I went to pump gas. And that's the way it is with your computer. It never caused you any problems until you tried to reformat a drive.
Right.
Boom. And everything is, you knew is out the window. And I know quite a bit about disk drives and so on. I think I told you the story, maybe Danny, as I saw the very first disk drive ever made while it was being built.
No, I didn't hear that.
And, so my history with disk drives goes way back, but it didn't take care of this particular case. I also had a Commodore, as you did. Two of them. Danny had one, I had one. And her transparency, well, see, there's another example of transparency. She wanted to, I can't remember, delete some files, move some files, I don't remember whatever. And she wasn't sure how to do it, so she asked me. I wrote down a list of steps for her. Do this first, then this, then this. And so the next day I came back and she had erased every file of hers. Well, there was one of the steps, like step 2, she didn't understand why that step was needed, so she just left it out.
Right. So it was a checklist, but not complete.
Well, it was a checklist, but she didn't use the whole
She didn't follow it exactly.
It was a laundry list.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, so you just chose the ones that made sense to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's kind of transparency when you get instructions. Do they make sense to you? You know, sometimes you see an instruction that seems very dangerous, like this is going to wipe out all my disk when I do this. And so that's another important thing in the design. And of course, a designer can give a list like that but you don't know what people are going to do. Like Danny, they say, well, this step doesn't make sense, so I won't do it. You can't guarantee that. In fact, you pretty much guarantee that's going to happen over and over again with different users, right? So you try to design so that it's not transparent and the user doesn't do anything, just press one button that says read my mind and erase the files that I want to erase, but don't touch the others.
Right.
And of course, then you can eliminate the button because you put in the mind reading device. So when you're sitting there at the computer, it's just quietly erasing the files you don't want. And of course, we don't know how to build that device.
Well, that might be okay. I think that might be fine with me so far. But I want to go back and ask you about transparency just for a minute. So when we think, okay. And again, the name of the book is System Design Heuristics. If you're watching, you can get it on LeanPub. And Jerry is doing this really neat thing, just so you know. He is releasing it in bits and pieces, as he calls it, like an old time serial maybe. And as I recall, each time he releases it, or on a somewhat regular basis, the price goes up a little bit. So I remember I saw a tweet from him and I got my copy right when it came out because as he wisely said, you'll get all the updates, but you'll pay the least amount for it. Does that sound correct?
That's correct. And next week I'm going to make a significant update and I'm going to raise the price. So,
because right now the price is $9 or $10? $10. $10.
It is $9.99 crap that Kindle has imposed on everybody. It's $10.
Call it $10.
The cost of some special coffee at Starbucks.
Right. Not, as we learned last week, though, not that you would buy this coffee because you don't drink coffee.
Right.
So I actually almost sent you a Starbucks card one time, and I'm glad that I know that now. I'll find something different.
Well, I have friends who I could give it to.
So when we think about a design heuristic like transparency, and I'm just really curious about this, it seems like this is the kind of thing that a designer themselves considers as they're approaching a problem, but hopefully, but is it also something where, and maybe again, I haven't gotten the exact idea here, does the design heuristic chosen, like transparency, go into some sort of documentation such that other people say, I see here you've prioritized transparency, and now I understand why that is. Is that sort of like a design reason document?
Yeah, but it isn't. One of the reasons I'll be writing about it is that a lot of designers don't really think about it. They'll design some part to be transparent, or they won't, where they ought to. And they never say why. The documentation never says, never say why. They just assume that. And we have a metaphor for transparency that we try to teach designers. And if you go to the airport, especially the private airport, where they still have propeller planes, and when the propeller is turning, it's transparent.
Yes, it is.
Right? You don't want to walk through there.
Oh, that's very true.
Okay? So transparency can be very dangerous. In other words, you let people go someplace where they shouldn't go. Just stay out of here, right? In those cases, you want, I don't know how to pronounce it, opacity, opaqueness. You want, you can't go there.
You can't go there. Yeah.
It's going to slice your head off. You don't want this to
I remember, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, there are every year a few people who walk into propellers.
Oh, helicopters too, I think.
Well, that's a little harder to do, but people can be stupid enough and manage to do that. So ideally, in one case, you'd want the propeller to somehow, when it's turning, you could still see it. It would look solid, so you wouldn't walk into it. And I don't know what you have to do to do that, but I'm sure that could be engineered. I've never seen it done. Right?
Yeah,
But
I haven't either.
a lot of warnings of people, a lot of warnings, don't you stay away from here. But, and still some people walk into propellers, right? Certainly going back to World War One, it was important that you could see through the propeller while you're flying, going the other way so you could shoot down other planes that you could see. If you couldn't see through the propeller journey, you wouldn't know what you were aiming at.
Now,
Typically, the guns were mounted in such a way that they were straight ahead, so you had to point the airplane at your target. Well, if you couldn't see it, if the propeller was, and they also had, and it was also in the early, very very early ones, they had the problem that although it visually was transparent, it wasn't transparent to the gun.
that's what I was thinking. And they would shoot their propeller off.
The propeller off. So then they came up with a device to synchronize the shooting the bullets with the propeller so you could shoot between blades as it was rotating, which must have been quite a feat.
I was thinking that's amazing, isn't it? Now, granted, the propeller is pretty small in comparison with the overall sort of area that, right?
Shooting at random, most of the time you won't hit it.
Most of the time, until you do.
That isn't good enough.
Right. Yeah. And so they do something where they actually, I don't know, I think I remembered that they would do something where the engine and the gun were integrated.
That was the invention. Well, that's a good metaphor for what you're doing. There are times when you want users, for example, to stay out of a certain thing.
Yeah.
Right? For example, when your system is connected to other systems and you think, oh, I'm just fixing my thing, and you happen to disturb other stuff in somebody else's place, and so on. So it's a difficult concept. I'm working on how to explain the several heuristics that a designer has to have to try to do a good job of making things transparent when they should be, for whom they should be, and to make them opaque for others, make them transparent if you do the right sequence of things like a combination lock or something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, stay out of here.
Now, you use the term system design heuristics.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't visual design heuristics. It doesn't even say software design heuristics.
That's exactly right. Because that's one of the most common mistakes I'm going to try to correct in this book is that you have to consider not just this box or silicon or whatever, and not just the program, but the people who are on it, who can do these stupid things or do intelligent things, maybe more intelligent than your computer. You have to consider the temperature in the room, the atmospheric pressure. It's a system. One of the ways we define system is a system is a collection of things, no one of which can be changed.
No one of which can be changed. Yeah. Why do I feel like that's something I'm not quite smart enough to grok? No. Does that mean I am unable to change a single item? Or does that mean I cannot change anything without affecting other things?
Yeah, other things, every time you change one thing, something else will change.
Okay. So I am able to make a change. I can turn this knob, but I should not imagine that that's the only thing that changed.
Right.
And does this come from the so much writing you've done on general systems thinking?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. That's trying to apply this and really, and this is maybe the most common mistake when systems really go wrong is where somebody thinks I can change just one thing and it won't affect anything else. Whenever you hear somebody saying that.
And you said things like environmental pressure. I remember one time I asked you and you said gravity. And so I feel like maybe my view of the system has been consistently too narrow.
Yeah, for example, you mentioned gravity. One of the things since gravity is part of all of our experiences, we designers may not think about that. When they started to go up into space capsules in zero gravity, they found some problems. Like when you breathe, you breathe in fresh air, you breathe out air which has got some of the oxygen removed and some other things in it from
Right.
carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. Well, in the gravitational field, you see, when you breathe, that air that you expel is drawn away by gravity. So you keep getting new air circulating to you. And you never thought about that.
Right.
Right? You go up in a space capsule and you breathe air out and it stays there.
And you breathe it right back in?
You breathe it right back in unless you do something about it, right? So they have to do something in that space capsule. Either put some device on the people, which they don't like, or you've got to have some kind of air circulation in there to make sure that they keep getting new air coming to them. So that's one example. You mentioned gravity.
Yeah.
We take that into account. Or when I was in Switzerland, we were living in the mountains there. Danny's doing her field work. And I played soccer with the kids. Okay. And I'm not much of a soccer player. I was a good goalkeeper because I used my hands, which they couldn't do very easily. But I would watch them. And you'd be there and I'd kick the ball towards you. They would immediately start running to the side because we were on the side of a mountain and the ball doesn't go straight. Gravity starts taking it down the hill.
Right.
And they instinctively did that. Instinctively, they didn't go the way the ball seemed to be going. They went to where it was going to go. And they did that without thinking about it or anything else because it totally confused me. I had never thought to do that. So they'd kick it towards me and I'd stay there and the ball would go over here. So they had included gravity in their system.
Mm-hmm.
And the hillside, the shape of the hill and so on. And this comes up all the time. When we had a house up in Colorado in the mountains, and our house was at 10,000 feet altitude. I got a disk drive there and it wasn't working properly. And I called the company, in that case I got in touch with them. I don't remember which company it was. And I'm talking to the guy and I said, could altitude affect this drive? Because some of them had air floating to keep the reading head off the disk. And the air is quite a bit thinner at 10,000 feet. So, oh no, it couldn't. We've tested them up to 8,000 feet. Right? Well, the system included me, who took the thing up higher than that, right? And might even go higher because of hikes, we took it much higher. So, yeah, all kinds of things that might affect what's going on. Like, I see sunlight shining through your window over there behind. I think it's if the computer is sitting in the sunlight a part of the day, and part of the day it might get overheated. And no, I don't even aware. Just when I work at this time of day, it doesn't work very well. But because your system is not big enough in your mind to take the fact that the sun is heating your. Right?
I remember this. I think we talked about this one time. That marvelous show, Car Talk, used to be on NPR with the two brothers who would give car advice. Frickin' Frack, the Tappet brothers, I think, or something like that.
I forget what the name was.
But my favorite episode was this guy who called in and he said, "Okay, whenever I take my car," he described the year, the make of the car. He says, "Whenever we go, every night we go for ice cream. If we buy vanilla ice cream, the car starts right back up afterwards and we come right home. But if we buy chocolate ice cream, the car will never start. I have to sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and get it working on it." And he was just completely, of course it was very funny, but at the end of the day, their hypothesis was the vanilla's at the front of the store right next to the doors and the cashier. So it's a much quicker trip.
Mhm.
and the chocolate was way back with the freezers, not kind of in the promotional. So just the difference in 4 minutes was causing the car to act differently.
Yeah.
But it was attributed to the flavor of the ice cream.
Well, of course, I've had many examples of that kind where I think I told you the one about the nuns, didn't I?
Well, I want to hear it again.
The computer would crash when the nuns were operating in this place. It was a hospital, and it didn't crash anybody else who was operating. So of course, they figured something the nuns are doing.
Right.
They finally figured out as the nuns in those days wore this particular order wore these long habits that reached all the way to the floor, and they would stand there at the console over one of the ventilating ducts on the floor, and the thing would overheat. Right?
There we go.
There was another one in England at the post office, I think, if I remember right, where when women operated the machine, it crashed, and when men, when a woman was operating it and reached out and touched the console, the machine would crash. And the men went, well,
What did that turn out to be?
pantyhose.
Like static electricity?
Electricity. Legs together, the pantyhose, and most of the men didn't wear pantyhose. So, but there are all kinds of blaming of the women. You don't know how to operate the machine. And
Yes.
right. So again, certainly from a testing point of view, I'm trying to teach testers to broaden their view of what the environment is. It could be how long a delay when you're doing a certain operation. You have to all go to the back of the store, and
Right.
the time that something happens. And it's certainly true. My machine now, when we're using it, if I don't do any keyboard interaction or mouse interaction for a certain period of time, it's certain things start happening automatically. Like there's one thing that checks memory, and when the machine is idle.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't do anything for whatever it is, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, it starts running this thing. When it's running this thing, then other things can't run.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's making assumptions about the environment in which I'm working.
Yeah, it would be easy to say, when I don't touch it, it breaks or it acts a different way. So
I keep watching it all the time. It
just keep hitting the keyboard every 5 minutes or something. Well, I'm really looking forward to finishing your book. And if you're just, if you haven't purchased it yet, today is the February 1st. This is a good day to buy it. I'll just say this video will go out because Jerry said the price is going to go up soon because he's making a major release next week to the book. And I think in general, like, just consider transparency. I hope this has been useful for folks. And we always like your questions, right? Tweet us questions, ask questions, email them to us. We'll take them in any form you want. We'd love to be able to address them as we have our chats.
Yeah, I did get a question about the cover of the book already.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it meant, but on the cover I have a rainbow.
Yeah.
And I was having trouble thinking about what would be a suitable cover for this book with this subject. And I finally decided I want something that would catch the eye. And I'm covering a whole spectrum of design issues. So rainbow would kind of show that. Well, some guy complained he thinks a rainbow is the wrong image. So I'm listening, just like on this show. Might get any feedback, some better idea for designing the cover. I'd be glad to have it.
Okay. So now you heard it here. If you would like to suggest a different cover to Jerry, he's very open to that.
Yeah, you don't even have to buy the book. I mean, just if you have a good idea for a cover, let me know. I'm not guaranteeing I'll use it because I make many ideas, but yeah.
And I think they could put, if you want to put your comments in the YouTube chat or in the comments there, we read all those. Love to hear that. So yeah, thank you very much, Jerry.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll talk next week.
Okay.
Okay.